At 1 minute past midnight on the 24th of July, a tariff covering almost everything the United States imports expired. In the same minute, a new one replaced it. The rate barely moved. The law behind it changed completely. It was the third law in 5 months to keep the tariffs running. To understand why that keeps happening, we need to go back to February. Never miss an episode. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and stay in the loop. On the 20th of February, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act does not give a president the power to impose tariffs. That single ruling voided the tariff program the administration had spent the previous year building. The scale of it is easiest to see in the money. In 2024, the United States collected roughly $8 billion a month in customs duties. By October 2025, that figure had reached about $34 billion. More than $166 billion had already been collected, and all of it became refundable to some 330,000 importers. A defeat of that size would normally end a policy. Instead, on the day the ruling took effect, the administration invoked a different law. Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 allows a president to impose a temporary surcharge on imports to correct a balance of payments deficit. It permits a rate of up to 15%, but for no more than 150 days. A flat 10% duty went on almost all imports, and the clock started running. In May, a federal trade court ruled that this version was unlawful too. The statute, it held, means a specific 1970s measure of the balance of payments, not a trade deficit, but the court granted relief only to the 3 importers who had sued. Everyone else kept paying. An appeals court stayed the decision in June, and that appeal is still unresolved. So 2 tariff regimes were found unlawful, and the collections barely paused. From the October peak, they fell to about $24 billion a month and settled there, still close to 3 times the level before any of this began. They settled because of what the administration did with the 150 days. 16 days after the clock started, the United States Trade Representative opened 60 investigations at once, under Section 301 of the same act. Section 301 is a different kind of authority. It is an explicit grant of tariff power tested over decades, and it does not expire. But it carries a requirement. The government has to identify a specific act, policy, or practice of a specific trading partner that is unreasonable and burdens American commerce. Historically, that has meant one country at a time. To cover the whole world, the administration needed a practice that almost no country could be shown to satisfy. The one it chose was the failure to impose and effectively enforce a ban on importing goods made with forced labor. Before this year, 3 countries had such a ban actually in force: the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The European Union has passed one, but it does not begin to apply until December 2027. The determination, published in June, was that all 60 economies failed. 54 had no prohibition at all. 6 had one on the books they were not effectively enforcing. The final action was signed on the 23rd of July, about a day before the old tariff ran out. 17 economies now pay an additional 10% and 38 pay 12.5%. 5 more have their combined rate capped rather than stacked: the European Union, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and Switzerland. Together, those 60 economies account for 99.4% of everything the United States imports: steel, aluminum, cars, semiconductors, aircraft, and pharmaceuticals are exempt. Most of them because they are already taxed under other authorities. The Budget Lab at Yale puts the resulting average tariff rate at about 11%, and the cost to the average American household at roughly $1,100 a year. At this point, an obvious question is why almost nobody has retaliated. Part of the explanation is that the measure is difficult to answer in kind. On the 27th of July, China's Commerce Ministry called it textbook protectionism and demanded that it be canceled, pointing out that the United States has never ratified the 1930 International Convention on Forced Labor. And then Beijing declined to retaliate. The main reason, however, is arithmetic. At 12.5%, the new duty leaves the United States inside the ceiling of 20% that China says was agreed in earlier talks. The European Union reached the same conclusion by the same route. Its trade commissioner, Maroš Šefčovič, said he was very surprised by the findings and called the tariffs unjustified. But the Commission's stated priority is keeping total American tariffs below the 15% cap it accepted in 2025. The notice is unusually direct about this. It says the 5 capped economies are capped because doing so is consistent with the terms of the existing reciprocal trade agreements. The rate was built to fit inside ceilings those partners had already accepted. Retaliating would mean reopening the agreement that contains the ceiling. So far, only Brazil has said it will take the matter to the World Trade Organization. There is also a cheaper way out, and this is where the measure stops behaving like a tax. The gap between the two tiers is 2.5 percentage points, and it has a price attached. A country that adopts a forced labor import prohibition moves from the higher rate to the lower one. Between the proposal in early June and the final action in late July, 7 economies did exactly that. Cambodia, Guatemala, Honduras, India, Sri Lanka, and Trinidad and Tobago imposed prohibitions. Jordan committed to one through a trade agreement, 7 new national laws in 7 weeks, and the government's own notice lists them by name. There are 2 possible explanations for that design. The first is the one the notice gives. The tariff exists to eliminate a practice, and the discount is the incentive to eliminate it. The second is that forced labor was simply the widest legal hook available for keeping a tariff the courts had twice taken away. These are not mutually exclusive, and the second is now being argued in court. Either way, each of the 60 economies must choose between 2 costs. It can pay a duty for failing a standard almost no country meets, or it can write the American standard into its own law and accept a lasting American say in how it polices its imports. Washington faces a quieter version of the same trade-off. A Section 301 tariff is lawful because it aims to eliminate the practice it targets. The more governments comply, the weaker the case for keeping the duty, and the revenue goes with it. 2 lawsuits were filed on the day the tariffs took effect, and the plaintiffs are familiar. One is a New York spice company that was among the 3 importers who defeated the balance of payments tariff in May. Another is the company that defeated the emergency powers tariff at the Supreme Court in February. Trade lawyers widely consider this version harder to overturn because Section 301 is a real delegation of tariff authority supported by a formal investigation record. Its weakness is breadth and speed. 60 investigations were opened, decided, and acted on in 133 days from a statute written for targeted disputes. Meanwhile, the bill for the first attempt is still being paid. In June, according to Treasury figures, the Customs Service paid more than twice as much out of the government's account as customs duties brought in. Those were the refunds from the February ruling going out. 2 of the 3 tariff regimes have been ruled unlawful. More than $166 billion is being returned, and the average tariff rate is roughly where it was a year ago. What the past 5 months have settled is not whether an American president can tax imports. It is how many different laws can be made to say so. 7 governments have already decided it is cheaper to rewrite their own trade laws than to wait and find out. That's all for today. Your daily shot of the world.